I'll have the cheapest meal on the menu, please.
Of course, sir. That's a great choice. Coming right up.
A man worth $80 billion who could buy the entire city block walks into a greasy diner wearing a thrift store jacket with a hole in the elbow. He sits in a torn vinyl booth and orders the cheapest thing on the menu, 2 eggs and a black coffee. The waitress, drowning in medical debt and working a double shift, looks at him not with disgust, but with a simple, tired kindness. But when a wealthy customer tries to humiliate the poor man, her reaction sets in motion a chain of events that will change their lives and the entire city forever. This isn't just a story about a rich man in disguise. It's about what happens when true character is finally seen. The air in the 90th floor boardroom of Garrick Global Holdings was so sterile it felt vacuum sealed. Edward Garrick, a man whose net worth fluctuated with the global markets, but always remained north of $80 billion, stared out the floor toe-sealing window. Below him, New York City sprawled like a circuit board, a complex map of lights and lives he owned, but did not understand. The optics are bad, Edward Lawrence Bishop, his COO and lifelong rival, said, his voice smooth and sharp. The Sentinel column this morning called you the Hermit King of Manhattan. They're painting you as disconnected, a dragon sitting on a pile of gold, completely detached from the people who actually use our products and live in our buildings. Edward didn't turn. The Sentinel is a tabloid, Lawrence. I don't care about optics. I care about the Q4 projections. And the board cares about the stock price, which is tied to public perception, Lawrence countered, leaning forward. They see you in your tower, approving acquisitions and closures, but never seeing the faces of the people affected. This new urban renewal project. It's displacing thousands. We need positive PR. What do you suggest? I go kiss a few babies at a shelter opening? Edward scoffed, finally turning. His suit was a dark, severe gray, costing more than the average car. Lawrence smiled, a predator's glint in his eye. No, something more immersive. I make you a wager, Edward. A challenge, if you will. I don't make wages. Then consider it a vital piece of market research. For 1 week, 7 days, you live like them. No access to your accounts, your cars, your name. We'll give you a room at a hostel in the warehouse district, a burner phone, $300 in cash. That's it. See if the Hermit King can survive among the commoners. Edward was about to dismiss the idea as absurd, a childish stunt, but he saw the look on Lawrence's face, a look of smug certainty that he couldn't do it, that he was, in fact, too soft, too removed, too royal to handle reality. The challenge wasn't about PR. It was about Lawrence testing his nerve. Fine, Edward said, his voice dangerously low. 1 week. But when I return, Lawrence, that urban renewal project's over budget committee, you're leading it personally from the ground. Lawrence's smile faltered, but he nodded.
Done.
2 days later, Edward Garrick was gone. In his place was Ed, a man who looked like he'd been chewed up and spit out by the city. His disguise was painfully simple. A worn flannel shirt from a thrift store, jeans faded at the knees, and a pair of scuffed work boots. He hadn't shaved in 2 days, and the gray stubble on his jaw made him look less like a billionaire and more like a man 1 step away from sleeping on the subway. The $300 was vanishing faster than he'd anticipated. The hostel room was a cramped, noisy box that smelled of mildew. For 48 hours, he had walked the streets, invisible. People didn't just ignore him. They looked through him. His power, his name, his sheer presence. It was all gone, stripped away by a cheap flannel shirt. He was hungry. Not the polite, I should schedule lunch. Hunger he was used to, but a knowing hollow ache in his gut. He had $40 left to last him 5 more days. He found himself standing outside the Blue Plate Diner. It was a relic, a long, narrow eatery wedged between a pawn shop and a laundromat. The sign flickered, the E in plate buzzing erratically. The windows were steamy, hiding the inside. He smelled grease, stale coffee, and the sharp tang of industrial bleach. He pushed the door open. A small bell tinkled. The diner was real. It was everything his boardroom was not. The vinyl on the booze was cracked, revealing yellow foam. The floor was worn checkerboard tile, a long counter stretched down one side, where a few tired-looking mend coffee mugs. In the air was the sound of sizzling, the clatter of plates, and a low static-filled radio playing a forgotten 80s song. He slid into a booth by the window. The seat was cold. He felt a dozen eyes flick to him, assess him, and dismiss him. He was just another piece of the worn-out scenery. A moment later, a waitress appeared. She looked exhausted. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe ponytail, and there were faint purple smudges under her eyes. But her uniform, a light blue dress with a white apron, was impeccably clean. Her name tag pinned slightly crookedly red. "Bethany Coffee?" she asked. Her voice wasn't cheerful or bubbly. It was flat, professional, and utterly tired. "Please, black," Ed said. His own voice sounded rough to his ears. She returned instantly, a heavy chipped brown mug in one hand and a coffee pot in the other. She poured without a word, slid a plastic-wrapped menu onto the table, and moved on to the next booth. Ed watched her. She moved with an efficiency that was almost hypnotic, clearing plates, refilling coffees, taking an order from a construction crew, all with a minimum of motion and zero wasted energy. He opened the menu. The prices were from another era. He scanned for the cheapest possible item that qualified as a meal. He found it under all-day basics. 2 eggs, any style, no sides. $3.50. When Bethany returned, her notepad ready, he didn't meet her eyes. He just pointed at the menu. "I'll just have the 2 eggs, sunny side up, and the coffee." He braced himself. He expected a sigh, an eye roll, a look of pity or contempt. He was, after all, taking up a valuable booth for a $350 order. Bethany simply wrote it down. "Come right up," she said in that same flat, professional tone. She turned, clipped the order to the rotating wheel for the cook, and went back to the coffee pot. Edward Garrick watched her go. She hadn't judged him. She hadn't smirked. She hadn't done anything at all. She had simply treated him like a customer. In his current state, it felt like an act of profound dignity. He wrapped his cold hands around the warm, bitter coffee mug, and for the first time in a week felt a strange, unfamiliar flicker of human warmth. Ed sat nursing his coffee, waiting for his meager breakfast. The diner was filling up with the morning rush. The noise level rose, a symphony of clattering forks, gruff morning greetings, and the relentless sizzle from the kitchen. Bethany moved through it all like a shark, all speed and efficiency, her face a mask of neutral politeness. The bell on the door tinkled again, but this time it was followed by a wave of loud, obnoxious laughter. A man and a woman strolled in, demanding attention. The man was in his late 30s, wearing a suit that was just a little too shiny and a watch that was clearly a status symbol. His hair was slicked back, and he carried himself with the unearned arrogance of a mid-level salesman who just closed a deal. The woman with him, Tiffany, was draped in labels, her perfume cutting through the smell of bacon grease. "Mitch, my man." The man boomed, spotting the diner's owner. Mitch, a perpetually stressed man in his 50s, behind the cash register. "Table for 2. The best one you got." Mitch just sighed and pointed with his pen. "Morning, Chad. Booth in the back is clean. Now, we'll take this one," Chad declared, gesturing to the booth directly across from Ed. He and Tiffany slid in, and Bethany was there a second later, water glasses in hand. "Hi, folks. What can I get you?" Chad didn't even look at her. He was busy trying to impress Tiffany. Yeah, coffee. And I want the lumberjack slam. Extra bacon. Extra. And tell the cook not to burn it like last time. She'll have the "What did you want, babe?" The avocado toast. Pathetic. "I want the healthy start omelet with a side of fruit," Tiffany said, snapping her menu shut. "Right," Bethany said, scribbling. 2 coffees, 1 lumberjack. Extra bacon, 1 healthy start. Just as she was about to turn away, the cook slapped a plate on the pass-through window. "Order up. 2 sunny." Bethany grabbed the plate. It was small, white, and held only 2 perfectly cooked, glistening, sunny side-up eggs. She walked it over to Ed's table and set it down gently. "Here you are, sir," she said. Ed murmured. Thank you. It was this simple, quiet exchange that seemed to infuriate Chad. He watched with a sneer as Ed picked up his fork. Seriously, Chad said, his voice loud enough to carry across the diner. Ed froze, fork halfway to the plate. Bethany paused, her body tensing. Excuse me? Ed asked. I said, seriously, Chad repeated, gesturing with his thumb. You come into a diner, take up a whole booth and order 2 eggs? Just 2 eggs? What you saving up for the toast? Tiffany giggled. Ed felt a hot flush of shame and anger creep up his neck. In his world, insults were delivered with silken-voiced precision in boardrooms, not blared across a diner. He had no protocol for this. I just wanted some eggs, Ed said, his voice small. Yeah, well, some of us are here to eat a real breakfast, pal, Chad sneered. People like you are bad for business. Just taking up space. Mitch ought to have a minimum charge. Before Ed could even process the humiliation, Bethany stepped directly between the 2 booths. She wasn't looking at Ed. Her gaze was locked firmly on Chad. Sir, she said, her voice no longer flat. It was cold. Cold and hard as steel. We don't have a minimum charge. All our customers are welcome here, regardless of what they order. Chad looked taken aback, then annoyed. Hey, I'm just saying. It's pathetic. No, Bethany said, her voice dropping lower, forcing Chad and Tiffany to lean in to hear her. What's pathetic is a grown man needing to insult a stranger to feel big in front of his date. He's a paying customer, the same as you. Now, I've got your order. Is there anything else I can get for you? The way she said anything else made it clear it was a dismissal, not an offer. Chad's face turned a blotchy red. He was used to being the loudest person in the room. Why are you sticking up for him? He's a bum. Look at him. I'm sticking up for my customer, Bethany retorted unblinking. And I'm asking you, as my other customer, to please be respectful of everyone else in this diner, or I can ask Mitch to find you a different table. Perhaps one by the kitchen door. The threat was clear. Tiffany actually recoiled, looking embarrassed. Chad, seeing he'd lost the power in the exchange, just scoffed and waved his hand. Whatever, fine. Just get me my coffee, sweetheart. And don't spit in it. I would never do that, Bethany said, her professional mask sliding back into place. Your coffee will be right out. She turned and walked away. The entire interaction had taken less than 90 seconds. Ed stared down at his 2 eggs. He felt shaken. He, Edward Garrick, had just been defended by a waitress he'd never met. She hadn't done it for a tip. She clearly didn't expect one from him. She hadn't done it because she knew him. She had done it because it was the right thing to do. It was a principle. He watched her as she went back to work, pouring coffee for Chad and Tiffany as if nothing had happened. She was efficient. She was tired, and she was in that moment the most impressive person Edward Garrick had met in a decade. He ate his eggs slowly. They were just eggs, but they tasted like a revelation. He looked at the waitress again. Really looked at her. Bethany. He wouldn't forget that name. When he was done, he left $20 on the table for his $3.50 meal and 2 pawns or $1 coffee. He walked out before she could see it, the little bell tinkling behind him. He had a lot to think about. Edward's week on the streets was supposed to be a challenge of survival. It was rapidly becoming an education. He couldn't get the diner or the waitress out of his head. He returned the next day, and the day after that. He became for the first time in his life a regular. He sat in the same booth, always ordering the same thing, black coffee. Sometimes he'd add a slice of dry toast. He was Ed, the quiet man in the corner, and he blended into the worn wallpaper. From this vantage point, he began to see the diner not just as a place to eat, a line item on a budget sheet, but as an organism. Mitch, the owner, was the stressed, anxious heart. The cook was the fiery lungs, and Bethany was the circulatory system, moving everywhere, delivering what was needed, keeping everything alive. Edward watched her. He saw her patience. He saw her help. Mr. Peters, an elderly man with shaky hands, read the specials printed on the whiteboard. She didn't just read them. She'd lean in close and say, "The meatloaf's real good today, Mr. Peters. S made it fresh this morning, not from yesterday." He saw her handle a young mother whose toddler was having a full-blown tantrum, screaming and throwing crayons. Bethany didn't scowl. She walked over, knelt, and offered the child a small cup with a maraschino cherry and a straw. "This is a special fireman's drink," she'd said, distracting the boy instantly. The mother looked at her with tears of gratitude. But it was during the lulls, the quiet mid-afternoon hours, that Ed learned the most. He'd sit for hours on one coffee, and Bethany, accepting him as part of the furniture, would work on other things. He saw her behind the counter, her back to the diner with a massive, heavy textbook open. He squinted. It wasn't a community college pamphlet. It was advanced corporate finance. One afternoon, he saw her on the pay phone by the restrooms, her back rigid. He could only hear her side of the conversation, her voice low and tense. "Mom, please don't argue with me," she whispered, her hand cupped around the receiver. "You have to get the prescription refilled." "No, I don't care what Dr. Howell said about the cost. Because we'll figure it out. I'll figure it out." "No, my shifts are fine. Mitch is giving me an extra one on Saturday." "Yes, and I'm eating. I'm fine." She hung up the phone and leaned her forehead against the wall for a full 10 seconds. Her eyes were closed. Ed saw her take one deep, shuddering breath, composing herself. Then she pushed off the wall, smoothed her apron, and walked back out to the floor, her professional mask firmly in place. "More coffee, Mr. Peters?" The pieces clicked into place. The exhaustion, the corporate finance textbook, the desperate need for extra shifts. She wasn't just a waitress. She was a caregiver, a student, and a provider, all wrapped in one tired 20-something body. Later that same day, Ed was paying for his 2 Dodo Zeros coffee at the register. Mitch was ringing him up. Bethany was on her way out, her shift over. She had swapped her uniform for jeans and a hoodie, and a heavy backpack was slung over one shoulder.
"See you tomorrow, Mitch," she said.
"Hold up, Beth," Mitch said, finishing with Ed. "Got a minute," she sighed, shifting the weight of the backpack. "Yeah, what's up?" Mitch lowered his voice. But Ed, pretending to look for a mint, lingered. "That bank loan, they denied it. The final appeal. They said our profit-to-debt ratio isn't viable. They're calling the note." Bethy's face went white. It was a paler, more terrified look than he'd seen on her yet.
"What?
"What does that mean?" "Calling the note. It means we have 30 days, Mitch said, his voice cracking. 30 days to pay the whole balloon payment. 50,000 tunnels, or they foreclose." 50,000? Bethy's voice was barely a squeak. "Mitch, that's how it's this whole block," Mitch said, gesturing vaguely. "Taxes have tripled. This new developer, this GGH company, has been buying up everything. They're squeezing us out. The bank knows the land is worth more than the diner. They'd rather we default, so they can sell the lot to the developers." Ed's blood ran cold. GGH Garrett Global Holdings, his urban renewal project, Lawrence's pet project. The diner wasn't just failing. His own company was the one holding the gun to its head. The bank wasn't an independent actor. Garrett Global likely owned the bank's debt, or was the developer the bank was colluding with. "Mitch, we can't," Bethany whispered, her eyes frantic. "This place, this is your whole life. It's my job. It's S's job. I know, kid," Mitch said, rubbing his face. I don't know what to do. I've got nothing left to leverage." Bethany stared at the floor, the heavy finance textbook in her bag seeming like a cruel joke. She looked up, her eyes hard.
"No, we fight."
"Well, we'll do a fundraiser. A Save the Blue Plate night. We'll call the Sentinel. A fundraiser for 50 grand, Mitch said, defeated. We'd be lucky to make 5. It's better than nothing, Mitch. We have to try." She turned and practically ran out the door, the bell tinkling violently. Ed stood by the register, his $2 award coffee completely forgotten. He was no longer an observer. He was a participant. His experiment, his stupid, arrogant wager with Lawrence, had just collided with reality. And the reality was Bethany, her sick mother, her finance textbook, and the $50,000 note his own company was responsible for. He left the diner, walking past the porn shop and the laundromat. He was Edward Garrick, the Hermit King, and he had just discovered that his kingdom was built on the ruins of places like the Blue Plate and on the backs of people like Bethany. The next day, the atmosphere in the diner was thick with a toxic, silent dread. The regulars, like Mr. Peters and the construction crew, could feel it. Mitch wasn't just stressed. He looked broken. Bethany was working on pure vibrating nervous energy. She was still polite, still efficient, but her smile was a brittle painted-on thing. Ed sat in his usual booth, nursing his coffee. He felt like a spy, a traitor in their midst. He knew their fate, and he knew he was the architect of it. Around 11 Noble, the bell tinkled. This time it wasn't a customer. A man in a sharp $1,000 suit walked in. He was all sleek lines and polished surfaces. A stark modern blade in the soft, worn-out diner. He held a leather portfolio. Ed recognized the type instantly. He employed thousands of them. This was a shark. The man ignored the "please wait to be seated" sign and walked directly to the counter where Mitch was counting receipts. "Mitchell Turner?" the man asked. His voice was smooth but carried an implicit condescension. "That's me," Mitch said, looking up wary. "Martin Henderson," the man said, not offering a hand, but placing a business card on the counter. "I'm with the Urban Redevelopment Division of Garrick Global Holdings." Ed's stomach tightened. This was one of Lawrence's men. Bethany, who was refilling the sugar caddies, froze. Her head snapped up. "I think you know why I'm here," Henderson said, opening his portfolio. "The bank's note. As you know, they've called it. And as of this morning, GGH has acquired that debt." You bought our debt," Mitch stammered. "We did," Henderson said with a dismissive little smile. "It simplifies things. Now you have two options. Option A, you pay the $50,000 plus our acquisition fees within." He checked his watch, a gold Rolex, 48 hours. "Or option B, which I strongly recommend." He slid a sheath of papers across the counter. "You sign this. It transfers the deed to GGH. We forgive the debt, and as a gesture of goodwill, we'll give you $5,000 for relocation expenses. You'll be out by the first of the month." "5,000? Mitch's voice was a choked whisper. "This place is worth 10 times that. My equipment alone. Your equipment is 20 years old, Mr. Turner. Your goodwill is non-existent. Your books are a disaster. We're not buying your diner. We're buying the dirt it sits on. The 5,000 is a gift. I'd take it." This was when Bethany moved. She put the sugar caddies down with a sharp clack and walked right up to Henderson. Ed had seen her face down. "Chad, this was different. This was not a bully. This was an executioner. You can't do this," she said, her voice shaking but full of fury. Henderson finally turned his gaze to her. He looked her up and down. The apron, the sensible shoes, the ponytail, and dismissed her. "I don't believe I'm speaking with you, sweetheart." "Her name is Bethany," Ed said, his voice startling himself. It was quiet, but it cut through the diner. Henderson, Mitch, and Bethany all turned to look at him. Ed, the bum in the corner booth. Henderson raised a perfectly plucked eyebrow. "I beg your pardon," I said. "Her name is Bethany," Ed repeated, standing up slowly. He suddenly felt the shawbass of his clothes, the itch of his stubble. "And she asked you a question. How can you do this?" Henderson let out a short, surprised laugh.
"Who are you?"
"The local color."
"A sit-down old man."
"This is business. It's above your pay grade." "He's a customer," Bethany snapped, her attention returning to Henderson. "And he's right. This is Mitch's life. My life. Sal's. You're throwing people out on the street for what? Another glass tower? Another bank?" "It's called progress, little girl," Henderson said, his patience gone. "This entire block is being leveled. We're building a new mixed-use commercial center. It's going to bring real jobs, not this." He waved a hand at the diner. "This place is a relic. It's time to let it die." "It's not a relic. It's a home." Bethany shot back. "Mr. Peters has been eating here every day for 30 years. Those men," she pointed to the construction crew, who were watching intently, "have nowhere else to go for a hot lunch they can afford. You're not just tearing down a building. You're tearing down a community. That is a very sweet, very naive sentiment, Henderson said, turning back to Mitch. But it doesn't pay the bills. Mitch, the clock is ticking. You have 48 hours to decide. The $5,000 offer is only good for today. If I walk out that door, it's gone. Tomorrow, we just take the building. Mitch looked at the papers, his hand shaking. He looked at Bethany, his eyes full of defeat. He looked at us, who was standing motionless in the kitchen window, a spatula in his hand. Get out, Mitch whispered. What? Henderson said. Get out of my diner. Mitch said, louder this time. He pushed the papers back across the counter. Get out. Henderson stared, genuinely shocked. He'd expected a broken man. He got one, but one with a last spark of defiance. He slowly, deliberately gathered his papers. Very well, Henderson said, his voice frigid. You've made a terrible, terrible mistake. We will begin foreclosure proceedings immediately. You, your cook, and your little attack waitress here will be on the street by Monday. Have a nice day. He turned on his heel and walked out, the bell tinkling mockingly behind him. The diner was dead silent. Bethany stood frozen, her chest heaving. Mitch slumped onto a stool, put his head in his hands, and for the first time began to openly weep. Ed sat back down in his booth. He felt a cold, precise rage he hadn't felt in years. This wasn't business. This was a mugging. And Martin Henderson, his employee, had just threatened a good man and insulted the one person who had shown Ed any kindness. Lawrence's urban renewal project wasn't just bad optics. It was rotten to the core. His experiment was over. It was time for Edward Garrick to come back. The rest of the day was a blur of quiet despair. The Blue Plate Diner felt like a funeral home. Mr. Peters came in, saw Mitch's face, and wordlessly ate his meatloaf. The construction crew was subdued. Bethany moved like a ghost. Her face pale, her textbook completely forgotten. Ed stayed. He couldn't leave. He ordered another coffee, and another. He watched Bethany mechanically wipe down the counter, her eyes red and puffy. He finally stood and walked over to her. Bethany. She looked up, startled. Oh, Ed, sorry. You need something? I heard what that man said about everything. She gave a bitter, sharp laugh. Yeah, well, progress, right? The little guys always get crushed. She slammed a salt shaker down. I don't know what to do. I read that textbook every night. Corporate finance. I'm trying to learn their language, how to build something, and they just take it with a piece of paper. What would you do? Ed asked, his voice low. What? If you could do something, if you had, I don't know, power, money, what would you do? Bethany stopped wiping. She leaned on the counter, staring at the worn Formica. I'd save this place. Not just for me, for Mitch. He gave me a job when no one else would. When my mom first got sick, he lets me study here. He's a good man. He doesn't deserve this. She looked around the diner. It's not just Mitch. It's Mr. Peters. It's S. He's got 2 kids. This isn't just a balance sheet. That's what they don't get. That's what that vulture Henderson doesn't get. It's a place. A real place. You can't just put a price on that. She finally looked at him, her eyes searching his. What's your dream, Ed? If you're not just here, what would you do? The question caught him off guard. No one had asked him that in 30 years. I'm not sure, he said, and it was the most honest thing he'd said all week. I think I'd want to build something that lasts, something that matters more than a stock ticker. She gave him a small, sad smile. Yeah, sounds nice. Suddenly, the diner door swung open, and the bell rang violently. In strode Chad, the arrogant salesman from the other day. He was alone this time, and he looked annoyed. Hey, waitress. He barked, sliding into his usual booth. Coffee and a menu. And be quick about it. I'm late for client. Bethy's shoulders slumped. She picked up a mug and a menu. Coming right up, mister. It's Chad. He snapped. She poured his coffee. As she turned, Chad noticed Ed standing at the counter. You again? Chad sneered, looking Ed up and down. What? Are you the new busboy, or are you just permanently attached to that counter? still trying to nurse that 2-egg breakfast from Tuesday. Bethany, who was walking away, stopped dead. "Leave him alone, Chad," she said, her voice trembling with the pent-up fury of the entire day. "I'm not in the mood. Not today." "Ooh, feisty," Chad mocked. "What's the matter? Boyfriend giving you trouble?" He looked at Ed again. "You know, pal, it's really sad leeching off a hardworking girl like this. Why don't you go to a shelter or something? Stop stinking up the place." This was it. This was the moment. Ed had seen Bethany defend him from this man when she was merely tired. Now he was about to see what she would do when she was broken. Bethany spun around. She walked not to Chad's table, but to the front door. She unlatched it and held it wide open. The cold October air rushed in.
"Get out," she said.
Chad stared. "What did you say to me?" "I said, get out," she repeated, her voice ringing with absolute final authority. "We are closed for you permanently. You've insulted our customers. You've insulted me. And you are a miserable human being. We don't want your money. Leave. You can't kick me out." Chad sputtered, standing up. "I'm a paying customer. I'll have your job. I'll talk to Mitch." "Mitch," Bethany yelled, not taking her eyes off Chad. Mitch came stumbling out of the back office, his eyes bloodshot.
"What?"
"What is it?" "I am refusing service to this man," Bethany said, pointing at Chad. "He is harassing another customer and me. I want him gone. Do you support me?" Mitch looked at Chad, who was puffed up with indignation. He looked at Bethany, who was standing like a statue, her hand on the door. He looked at Ed, the quiet man who had been the subject of the abuse. Mitch walked to the counter, picked up the phone, and started dialing. "Yeah, I support her." "Sir, you can leave on your own, or you can explain it to the police."
"Your choice."
Chad's face went from red to white. He was a bully, and his bluff had been called. This is ridiculous. This place is a dump anyway. You'll be hearing from my lawyer." "Great," Bethany said. "Tell him to send his letters quickly. This dump might not be here next week. Thanks to people who think they own the world." Chad grabbed his coat, threw $2 on the table for the coffee he hadn't drunk, and stormed out, shoving past Bethany. She slammed the door behind him and locked it. She flipped the open sign to closed, even though it was only 3 or 8 p.m. The diner was silent again. "Bethany," Mitch said, looking stunned. You shouldn't have." "I should have," she said, her voice shaking. "If we're going down, Mitch, we're going down with some dignity. We are not going to be some rich jerk's punching bag. Not while I'm here." She leaned against the door, the adrenaline finally leaving her. She slid down the wall and sat on the floor, burying her face in her hands. "Oh God, Mitch. I think I just cost us a customer." Mitch just walked over and sat on the floor next to her. "It's okay, kid. It's okay. He was a jerk anyway." Ed watched them, this broken owner and his lion-hearted waitress sitting on the floor of their doomed diner. He had seen her kindness. He had seen her fury. He had seen her dignity. He had seen enough. He walked to the door. Bethany looked up, her face stained with tears. "Thank you for that," Ed said, his voice rough. "We look out for our own." "Ed," she whispered. "Yes, you do." He unlocked the door and walked out. He didn't go back to the hostel. He walked 3 blocks, turned a corner, and saw a black sedan idling. It had been waiting for him 24/7 for the entire week. He tapped on the window. His security guard, Robert, a man who hadn't seen him in this state before, stared in shock. "Mr. Garrick." Ed pulled open the back door and slid in. The smell of rich leather and sanitized air was a shock. "Take me home, Robert," Edward said. "And get Lawrence Bishop on the phone now." The next morning, the sky was a flat, unforgiving gray. It was 10 master. Inside the Blue Plate diner, the mood was furial. Mitch and Bethany were there. S was in the kitchen, but he wasn't cooking. There were no customers. Mitch had locked the door. They were waiting for the 48-hour deadline to expire. They were waiting for the end. "I called the Sentinel," Bethany said, sipping a cold coffee. "They said they'd look into it, which means they won't." "I called my cousin, the lawyer," Mitch said. He said, "We're well and truly screwed." That's a direct quote. A sharp, authoritative knock echoed on the glass door. His back, Mitch whispered, his face ashen. Bethany stood up, her jaw set. Let him in. We'll face him. Mitch walked over and unlocked the door. Martin Henderson entered, a smug, satisfied smile on his face. He was holding his leather portfolio. Good morning. I see you've decided to be sensible. I have the severance papers right here. 5,000 as promised. Sign here, and we'll have your things cleared out by we're not signing, Bethany said. Henderson's smile vanished. Excuse me. We've been over this. The foreclosure is filed. It's over. This is just a courtesy, too. You're sure about that? A new voice said. Henderson spun around. Standing in the doorway where Henderson had just been was a man. He was flanked by 2 other men in severe dark suits and 1 woman holding a briefcase. This new man was tall, imposing, and dressed in a bespoke navy blue suit that probably cost $20,000. His hair was perfectly styled, his jaw clean-shaven, and his eyes. Bethy's breath caught in her throat. She knew those eyes. Mitch stared. Ed? Is that the man was Ed, but he wasn't. He was a different person entirely. The worn-out, beaten-down sadness was gone, replaced by an aura of absolute terrifying power. Henderson's face, however, went from smug to confused to bone-white terror in the span of 3 seconds. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. Mr. Garrick, Henderson stammered, his portfolio slipping from his hand and hitting the floor with a dull thud. Sir, I had no idea. What are you doing here? Edward Garrick ignored him. He looked past him, his gaze settling on Bethany. Bethany, Mitch, my apologies for this interruption, Edward said. His voice was the same, yet entirely different. It was smooth, educated, and resonant with command. Mr. Garrick, Bethany said, her mind completely unable to connect the 2 images. I don't understand. You're your Ed. You're the man with the 2 eggs sunny side up, Edward finished, a small grim smile touching his lips. Yes, I was. And I must say, they were excellent. Peeking from the kitchen, just nodded dumbly. Sir, I can explain. Henderson yelped, scrambling to pick up his papers. This is just a standard acquisition, a minor property on the new development block. It's just business. Edward finally turned his cold, powerful gaze on Henderson. Just business, Martin? Is that what you call threatening a man in his own shop? Insulting his staff, offering him $5,000 for a property you and I both know is the linchpin of the whole block. Sir, I was just following the directive from Mr. Bishop's office. Acquire at all costs. Keep the overhead low. That was the memo. Henderson was sweating now, his polished veneer cracking wide open. Mr. Bishop's memo did not, I assure you, include being a cartoon villain, Edward said dryly. You told Mr. Turner this place was a relic that needed to die. You called Ms. Price sweetheart and little girl. You represented my company, my name with a level of thuggery I find appalling. Sir, Martin, Edward said, cutting him off. You're fired.
It was so simple, so fast.
You can't. I can. I just did. The 2 men behind me are from security. They will escort you back to your office. You will pack your personal items. Your severance will be nothing. Now give your briefcase to Janet. The woman with the briefcase stepped forward. Henderson, looking utterly destroyed, handed it to her. Get him out, Edward said. The security men took Henderson by the elbows. Mr. Garrick, please, he pleaded. They guided him out the door. The bell tinkled, and he was gone. The diner was silent. Edward Garrick stood in the middle of the room, the billion-dollar man in the 5 and dime diner. He turned to Mitch and Bethany, who were clutching the counter for support. Mr. Turner, Ms. Price, I am Edward Garrick. I am the CEO and founder of Garrick Global Holdings, and I am deeply, truly sorry for what my company has done. He walked over to the counter and unclipped a pen from his jacket. He took the foreclosure papers from Henderson's fallen portfolio and in a single bold stroke wrote void across the front page. He signed his name, E. Garrick. This is over, he said, sliding the paper to Mitch. The debt is conled. The Blue Plate Diner is and will remain your property, free and clear. Mitch looked at the paper. He looked at Edward. He sank onto a stool, his legs giving out. Bethany just stared at Edward, her mind racing. The quiet man, the textbook, the fight with Chad, his question. What would you do if you had power? It was you, she whispered all week. You were what? Testing us? I was testing myself, Edward said, his voice softer. I was lost. My company, my life, it had become sterile, disconnected. I was told I didn't understand the real world. So I came to see it. I didn't expect to find this. I didn't expect to find you. He looked at her, his gaze direct and filled with a profound respect. Your kindness to a man you thought was a bum. Your defense of him against that bully, Chad. You're your character, Bethany. When you had every reason to be bitter, you were kind. When you were facing ruin, you were dignified. You reminded me of what value actually means. The door tinkled again. A man rushed in, looking frantic. It was Lawrence Bishop, Edward's COO. Edward, thank God Robert called me. What is this? What are you doing? I've got Henderson screaming on the phone. You can't just fire him. That foreclosure is vital to the Lawrence stopped. He saw the diner. He saw Mitch. He saw Bethany. And he saw the look on Edward's face. The wager is off, Lawrence. Edward said.
What?
But you completed the week, Lawrence said, confused. I said it's off because I won. Edward said, I found the one thing our $80 billion company is completely bankrupt in integrity. And as for the urban renewal project, it's cancelled. Effective immediately. Cancelled? Lawrence shouted. Edward, that's a 9-figure project. The board will have your head. Let them try, Edward said. I'm dissolving the urban renewal division. We're not in the business of tearing down communities anymore. We're in the business of building them up. He turned back to Bethany. Which brings me to my offer. Bethany stared, her head spinning. And an offer? This isn't charity, Edward said quickly, holding up a hand. I saw you studying, Bethany. Advanced corporate finance. I saw you run the numbers on a fundraiser in your head when Mitch told you about the loan. You're smart. You're tough. And you have something my entire company lacks. A moral compass. He took a step closer. I'm not canceling the project, Lawrence, he said, looking over his shoulder at his stunned COO. I'm pivoting. I'm creating a new division at Garrick Global, the Garrick Community First Initiative. Its entire purpose will be to find small businesses, community cornerstones like this diner that are being squeezed out by predatory loans or corporate expansion, and save them. We'll provide microloans, business support, and legal protection.
We won't buy them.
We'll invest in them. He turned his full attention back to Bethany. I need someone to run it. Someone who understands what it's like on this side of the counter. Someone who knows the difference between a relic and a home. I want you, Miss Price. I want you to be the head of this division. Bethy's knees felt weak.
Me? Run.
A division. I'm a waitress. You're the sharpest mind I've met this year, Edward said. And you're the only person I trust not to turn it into another soulless profit center. The job comes with a salary, of course, a significant one. We will also pay for the full completion of your degree. And he paused, his voice softening. I overheard your phone call about your mother. The initiative's first act will be to take on her medical care. All of it. Consider it covered. This is not a gift, Bethany. It's an investment in our most valuable new executive. You've earned it. Tears were streaming down Bethy's face. Not tears of sadness or fear. Tears of sheer dumbfounding release. Yes, she whispered. Yes, of course.
Yes. Good.
Edward smiled. Janet, he said to his assistant. Get Miss Price's information. We'll start the paperwork. Just then, as if the universe had a sense of comedic timing, the doorbell tinkled. Everyone turned. It was Chad. He stormed in, his face a mask of self-righteous fury. I knew it, he shouted, pointing a finger at Bethany. Mitch, I just spoke to my lawyer. You cannot refuse service to me. I'm filing a suit against this whole dump for his voice died. He saw the men in suits. He saw Lawrence Bishop. And he saw Ed the bum now wearing a $20,000 suit looking at him with the cold indifference of a god. Chad, Edward said, his voice dangerously pleasant. What a surprise. Please come in. Chad froze. Who what? You work for Precision Sales, don't you? Edward asked. Yes, I'm their top associate. Where Edward corrected, Precision Sales has a $50 million annual contract supplying office equipment to Garrick Global's entire North American portfolio. A contract which, as of about 30 seconds ago, is under full and immediate review. Lawrence Bishop's head snapped up. Edward, we can't. Their pricing is locked in. We can, Edward said. I will not have my company associated with any firm that employs bullies. Chad, you came in here time and again and harassed a man you believed was poor and defenseless. You insulted a woman who was just trying to do her job. Your behavior was, to use your own word, pathetic. You can tell your boss that Edward Garrick pulled the contract personally. You might want to update your resume. Chad's face was a grotesque mask of horror. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He just turned and stumbled back out the door, a broken man. The karma was instant. It was total. Edward turned back to the room. He looked at Mitch, who was now clutching the void-marked paper like a winning lottery ticket. Mitch, your diner needs work, Edward said.
The booths are torn.
The sign is flickering. My new division's second act will be to fund a full top-to-bottom renovation of the blue plate. Whatever you need, no strings, no loan. Consider it back pay for the education you all gave me. Mitch just nodded, tears flowing freely. Thank you, Mr. Garrick.
Thank you.
Months later, the blue plate diner was gleaming. It had new vinyl booze in the same classic blue, a new non-flickering neon sign, and a polished floor, but the charm was the same. S was still in the kitchen. Mitch was at the register laughing. Mr. Peters was in his usual booth. The bell tinkled. Edward Garrick walked in wearing a casual sweater, not a suit. Afternoon, Edward. Mitch grinned.
Mitch.
Edward nodded. He slid into his old booth. A moment later, Bethany approached. She was dressed in a sharp blazer and dark jeans, holding a tablet. She looked transformed, confident, rested, and vibrant. You're late for our meeting, she said, a playful smile on her lips. I know, Edward said. I was reviewing the Precision Sales fallout. Their stock dropped 30%. They fired Chad. Good, Bethany said. She sat across from him, opening her tablet. Now, about the community project in the warehouse district. I've identified 3 businesses just like this one being squeezed by the new urban renewal group on that side of town. You're enjoying this, he observed. I'm good at it, she corrected. Mom's new doctor is amazing, by the way.
Thank you.
I'm glad. There was a comfortable working silence. Finally, Bethany looked up from her tablet. Can I get you anything? Edward Garrick looked at his new colleague, his partner in this new venture. He looked at the diner he had almost destroyed and had instead saved. He smiled. You know, he said, I'll have 2 eggs, sunny side up, and a black coffee. Bethy's smile widened. She didn't even write it down. Coming right up. What we just saw wasn't just about a rich man learning a lesson. It was about the incredible quiet power of dignity. Bethany didn't know a billionaire was watching. She defended Ed because it was the right thing to do. She stood up to that bully Chad and the corporate vulture Henderson, not because she thought she would win, but because her integrity was not for sale. This story shows us that character isn't who you are when the boss is watching. It's who you are when you think no one is. True value isn't in a bank account. It's in how you treat the person who can do nothing for you. What did you think of Bethy's courage? Have you ever seen someone stand up for a stranger like that? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to see it, and be sure to subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories that will inspire you. Thank you for watching.
GA.